welcome to the deep dive. Ready for this? We're taking a deep dive into BERT. Bidirectional encoder representations from transformers,
Mhm.
but specifically for all the software developers out there.
We're skipping all the buzzwords. No philosophy. Straight to the architecture, the training, the step-by-step, like how it actually works, code and all.
Sounds good to me. But before we get too deep, what exactly is BERT? At its core, I mean. And why should why should they even care?
Well, at its heart, BERT is a language model. Pre-train on just a massive amount of text data. It's kind of like a neural network that's already got a deep understanding of language, like even before you start training it.
Like a programmer who's seen every code base out there, so they can adapt quickly.
Exactly. Imagine training a model from scratch every time you need to do some new language task, like sentiment analysis or question answering, whatever, right?
Yeah.
BERT's different. You get to leverage all that pre-trained knowledge. Saves a ton of time and resources.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. But this pre-training, how does that even work? I mean, do you just feed it raw text and it like magically learns all the ins and outs of language?
It's not magic exactly, but it is pretty amazing. You see, BERT's trained using something called unsupervised learning. They use these massive data sets like Wikipedia or books corpus, just huge, huge collections of text. And it learns all these patterns and relationships from the data itself without needing any, labels.
So it finds structure in the chaos, right?
Right.
Kind of like a self-taught programmer, maybe. But what makes BERT different? I mean, there's got to be a bunch of language models out there.
You're right, there are, but one key difference is that BERT is bidirectional.
Bidirectional.
Yeah. So traditional models, they only process text one way, right, either left to right or the other way around. But BERT BERT analyzes it in both directions at the same time, just like we do when we're reading, actually.
Makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
The meaning of a word can change a lot depending on what comes before or after it. But how does it do that? How does it learn bidirectionally?
Well, one of its secret weapons is it's something called the masked language model, MLM for short. Imagine you take a sentence and you randomly mask out some of the words. BERT's job is to predict those missing words, just based on the words that are still there.
Like a giant fill in the blanks for a computer? That's actually pretty smart. That's got to help it learn how words are like related to each other.
Exactly. But there's more to it than that. See, they have to stop BERT from cheating,
Yeah.
from picking up patterns in the masking itself. So they have some pretty clever tricks. Like sometimes they replace a masked word with a completely random word, and sometimes they just leave the original word there just to keep BERT on its toes.
Keeps it honest. Okay, so that's for understanding words. But what about sentences? I mean, how does BERT learn about how sentences relate to each other? And thinking like chatbot developers, would that be huge for them?
Absolutely. That's where the next sentence prediction task comes in, or NSP. So during pre-training, they give BERT these pairs of sentences, right? And BERT has to figure out if the second sentence, if it logically follows the first one.
So it's learning how to hold a conversation, how to keep it going. Yeah, that would be pretty crucial for chatbots.
You got it. NSP teaches BERT how sentences connect, how they build on each other, which is essential for, stuff like question answering or natural language inference.
Okay, so we have BERT. It's pre-trained. It understands language thanks to MLM and NSP. I'm curious about the architecture now, though. What's like the engine driving all this learning?
BERT's built on the transformer architecture. It's a really powerful neural network designed for handling sequential data like text. And the secret sauce, it's in something called the self-attention mechanism.
Attention sounds like some deep AI thinking going on there.
Not exactly. Think of it like this. Your code can analyze all its variables at the same time. Figure out which ones matter most for the output. Self-attention's kind of like that. It lets BERT look at all the words in a sentence at once. It considers all their relationships all at the same time.
So instead of going word by word, it takes in the whole sentence. That sounds way more efficient. And honestly, probably more like how our brains work, too.
You got it. It's a big difference from those traditional models that process text, one word at a time. Self-attention lets BERT capture those long-range dependencies, those little nuances other models might miss.
Got it. Okay, so MLM, NSP, self-attention, all working together to give BERT that deep understanding of language. But how do developers use this? This is all great in theory, but how do we take that pre-trained model and actually like make it do something for them.
That's the cool part, right? Bert's like super adaptable. Once you've got that pre-trained model, you can fine-tune it for your, whatever your specific task is. Kind of like you take a programmer who's already amazing and you give them like specialized knowledge in some new area.
That's a really good analogy, actually. Let's say you want to build a system to analyze like customer reviews, right? And figure out, are they positive or negative? Bert already gets all the language stuff, but it doesn't know about, happy customers and frustrated customers and all that.
Okay, so we need to teach it that. How do we do that? How do we give it that context?
Basically, you just create a training data set.
Yeah.
A bunch of reviews that are already labeled, positive or negative. It's Bert's crash course in customer satisfaction. So like we show it what we want it to learn, kind of like comments in code.
To guide it.
Yeah, exactly. You take this labeled data, feed it to Bert, and you add a little bit of code to define the task. So in this case, it'd be sentiment classification. Usually that means adding like a classification layer on top of Bert's output.
So Bert's the engine, this new layer's the steering wheel.
That's it. Like Bert looks at the review and it says, okay, based on everything I know about language and the examples you gave me, I think this is 85% likely to be positive and 15% negative. And then the classification layer, it takes that and makes the final call, positive or negative.
Got it. So they work together. Bert gets the language and we steer it to the, to the answer we need. But I'm curious, does fine-tuning actually change Bert, like, inside? Is it still doing that, the MLM and NSP stuff?
No, actually, no. During fine-tuning, we switched to supervised learning. We're showing Bert labeled examples, and we're tweaking its internal parameters so that its predictions match those labels. Like fine-tuning a variable till you get just the output you want, right?
Exactly. And the really amazing part is Bert doesn't need a ton of data for this. Because because it already has that, that solid base in language. It can learn new stuff super fast.
It's like having a programmer who can pick up a new language in like no time because they've already mastered all the core concepts.
Yeah.
That's got to be a game changer.
It is. It totally is. And it opens up so many possibilities for developers. We talked about sentiment analysis, but you can do question answering with Bert
Or named entity recognition, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
We were going to get to that. Let's dive into those a little more. How would we do question answering? That seems like a tough one.
It is tough, but Bert makes it way easier. You feed it a question, right? And you feed it some text that, that might have the answer. The trick is you got to add some code to help Bert find the exact part that answers the question. The exact words in the text, I mean.
So it's like Bert's got to take a reading comprehension test.
Yeah.
But instead of circling the answer, it like highlights it or something.
Exactly. And for named entity recognition, it's similar. You give it a sentence and you add some code that helps it find and label the entities in that sentence, kind of like tagging variables. Except Bert's tagging people, organizations, locations, stuff like that.
So it's like a superpowered text parser that we don't have to build ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we just use Bert. It's almost too good to be true. What about like downsides? Are there limitations to using Bert that developers should know about? So we've spent this whole episode taking Bert apart, right?
Yeah.
Seeing how it learns, how it works, how developers can use it.
Yeah, we've seen how this model, this pre-trained model, can do all these complex things.
Into an analysis, question answering, and what was it?
Named entity recognition.
Yeah, named entity recognition. It's a pretty powerful tool.
For any developer working with language.
Totally. But I'm thinking bigger picture now. What does this mean for software development in general?
Well, Bert it's a pretty fundamental shift for how we approach, natural language processing.
Not just like a little improvement.
Right. It's a whole new way of doing things.
Like going from procedural to object-oriented programming.
Yeah, like that. Bert lets us build stuff that we just couldn't even think about a few years ago. Applications that really, really get language and can respond to it.
Okay, so what does that look like? This Bert-powered future.
Imagine like search engines that actually get what you mean, not just the words you type.
That'd be nice.
Or chat bots that can have a real conversation, back and forth and really help you.
Or like virtual assistants that know what you need before you even ask.
Yeah, that's it. We're really close to a whole new way of interacting with computers.
Exciting stuff. But what about developers who aren't, they haven't really gotten into machine learning yet? Do we all need to become like Bert experts to keep up?
Well, the good news is The good news is that BERT's not that hard to get started with. You don't need to, you don't need a PhD or anything.
So it's like any other library or framework. There's a learning curve, but anyone can pick it up.
Exactly. And there are so many pre-trained BERT models already out there, and all these open source tools that make fine-tuning like really easy.
So we can just jump in and start building stuff.
Yeah, with just a few lines of code.
That's pretty cool. But I mean, there are skills that are becoming more important, right? With all this BERT stuff going on.
For sure, like the fundamentals of natural language processing. Those are more important than ever. Knowing how language works, how it's structured, all that.
So it's not just about like blindly using BERT. You got to understand what's going on under the hood.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing is knowing when to use BERT and when to use something else. It's not a magic bullet for every problem.
It's a powerful tool, but you got to know how to use it.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
like any advanced technology, it's not about replacing people. It's about making people better.
Right. And like with any powerful technology, we got to be careful, right? Think about the ethical side of things.
Absolutely. BERT can generate really realistic text, which means it could be misused.
Yeah, like all those deep fakes and stuff.
Right, right. It's a reminder that we have to think about, what we're building, even when we're pushing the limits.
It all comes down to this, right?
Yeah.
BERT, AI, it's all just tools.
Tools that can be used for good or bad
And it's up to us
to the developers
to make sure they're used for, for good.
to make the world a better place.
That's a great point to end on, I think. We've covered a lot today, the technical details of BERT, how it might change software development, even the ethical stuff.
And if we zoom out even more, BERT's just one example of what's happening in AI right now.
And it's moving so fast. Things are changing so fast.
It's going to be even more transformative in the years to come.
So for all you developers out there,
Yeah.
whether whether you've been doing this forever or you're just starting out,
Now is the time to dive into BERT.
see what you can build with it.
It can really change how you work
Make you a better developer for sure.
and help you build things that nobody thought was possible.
And that's it for the deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring,
Yeah.
and keep pushing the boundaries.